The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How to Hunt with Zeek and Sigma. We will be beginning the presentation shortly. Please stand by. Hello and welcome to Corellight's webcast, How to Hunt with Zeek and Sigma. Today we'll be talking about enhancing threat hunting and detection capabilities by using Zeek-powered Sigma rules in your SIM, along with some ideas on how to get started using Corellight's threat hunting guide. And if you don't already have Zeek deployed in your environment, we'll also quickly touch on how Corelight can help you get up and running quickly. Following our presentation today, we'll also have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window at any time. Today's presentation will be recorded. Everyone that's registered will receive a follow-up email. In that email will be a link to the recording. Also, when you view that recording on YouTube, you will also have a link to access the slides in the presentation, which will be useful for some of the resources that will be hyperlinked in today's presentation. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our speakers. With me today, we have Vince Stauffer, Senior Director of Product Management at Corelight, Mark Overholzer, Sales Engineer at Corelight, and I'm Ed Smith, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Corelight. All right, let's get started. First, I'd like to provide a quick overview of Zeek. Zeek is a network security monitor. It's likely that a lot of people, or most people on this call, are probably already familiar with it. But if not, let's just do a quick overview to ensure everyone has a base level of understanding. So to understand the power of Zeek as a security data source, I think it's important to kind of understand some of the challenges that are associated with other types of network security and security data sources. And you may have, a lot of these sources on your network. And the challenge is that a lot of these sources just weren't built for security. So you may have existing data types like firewall logs or NetFlow coming from your routers, application logs, logs from file servers, FTP servers. They do provide visibility, but that visibility wasn't really designed for security use cases, especially in terms of threat hunting. These log sources, these data sources, designed for things like IT or network performance monitoring or debugging a problem with network communications. Not really intended. They weren't really intended to capture security relevant information. So not always a great source of data for threat hunting. And looking at looking at something like PCAP in particular. So if you wanted to do full packet capture analysis, if your budget allows, you might be able to store a few days, a few weeks of information if you're lucky and you have the budget and the capability to do that. So PCAP can provide pretty deep set of data that really can provide a lot of information, but it only goes back a few hours, a few days. And when we're dealing with attacks that are measured in weeks or months, the window of that history that PCAP provides isn't going to go back that far. PCAP's also somewhat difficult to use. It's not very quick and easy to find an answer if you have to fire up that PCAP in a tool like Wireshark. And to quote a customer of ours, it's going to be a bad day when you have to open up Wireshark to investigate an issue. So PCAP has those answers that we're looking for usually, but not very easy to get those answers quickly. And if we're going far back enough in time, they may not be available. So what's the alternative to all of this? We think that Zeek is a great alternative to all of this because it helps provide very rich security relevant information that's very useful for incident response as well as threat hunting. So Zeek is a very powerful open source network monitoring framework. And at a high level, what Zeek is doing is it's taking in raw traffic, taking in network packets, usually from a TAP or a span port. And then Zeek is performing deep packet inspection using dozens of protocol analyzers, looking at what's going on in the network, and then transforming that network traffic into logs. So the output of which are 50 plus logs. You see some of them on the screen here, covering dozens of protocols. And all of these logs are interlinked. So you can do fast searching, fast pivoting, and connect the dots to see, what happened in a particular security network connection from a security perspective. And that's what we see on the screen here with the lines that are kind of connecting the logs. So very easy to pivot through this data to find the answer that you're looking for or the full story of what happened. Another nice thing that Zeek does is it does file extraction. So it will extract files as they cross the wire, which you can then store for analysis, store for forensics, and capture every single, all of those files that are crossing your network. And then finally, Zeek is great for scripting. It's a fully Turing complete programming language. You can write behavioral, statistical, and pattern-based detections on top of this rich Zeek data, and do some pretty interesting things. Really go above and beyond what a typical IDS solution can do. So you can write your own scripts. You can use Zeek packages contributed by the community. If you're a Corelight customer, we have some really interesting things you can do with encrypted traffic with our encrypted traffic collection. So in summary, Zeek is a great tool. It's the open source project's been around for 25 years. It's battle tested. It's taught in network security classes all around the world. There's a huge community behind it with tens and thousands of contributors. So great project and a great ecosystem as well. So now I'd like to spend just a brief moment to talk about how Corelight can help you quickly deploy Zeek in your environment using one of our sensors. Corelight, the company, was founded by the creators and maintainers of Zeek. So one of the things that we do is we make it really easy to deploy Zeek and really get the maximum value out of it. The way that we deploy is using one of our physical virtual software or cloud sensors. And this allows you to get Zeek up and running very quickly in a matter of minutes. And a typical deployment, the way that this looks like, starting from the left, going to the right, we take in packets from a TAP, span, or a packet broker. The network data goes into one of our Corelight sensors. And at this point, we can take in additional information for enrichment, such as threat intel feeds or IOCs, or we can bring in environmental information from a CMDB, apply whitelist or blacklist information. And then from there, we export our logs and our insights to another location. So typically a SIM or an analytics solution, a data lake, or you can just save the raw logs to disk. There's also the file extraction that I mentioned earlier. We can store those files out to a storage location. We can do things like deduplication, and then you have those files for later analysis or for forensics and investigations. So that's a summary of Corelight and how we can help you quickly deploy Zeek in your environment. Next, I'd like to talk about or introduce you to Corelight's Threat Hunting Guide. The Threat Hunting Guide, it's a great companion for Zeek, as well as the Sigma rules, which Vince is going to talk about in a moment. So this is our second version of the Threat Hunting Guide. The first one was focused more around kind of deployment and instrumentation location on your network. With version 2, it's centered around the MITRE ATT&CK framework, organized by TTPs from MITRE. This is a great resource to help you get started with threat hunting using network data. Threat hunting is all about forming a hypothesis or some sort of an idea or hunch about what could or what might be taking place on your network, and then taking the time to explore that and understand, is this happening in your environment? What are the signs and indications that might be happening? So this threat hunting guide is a great place for you to start developing a hypothesis that you can then go off and explore with Zeek on your network. So with that, I'd like to now pass the mic to Vince, who's going to talk to you a little bit about Sigma.
Great, thanks, Ed, and hello, everyone. I'm going to talk a bit, just intro about what Sigma is, and then we'll make an exciting announcement after that. So if you are not familiar with Sigma, jump to the next slide here. Sigma is an open source, basically query language designed to be agnostic to the SIM that you're using. So it really allows you to create a rule, whether it's a detection rule or a simple search or query, and write that once in the Sigma language, and then be able to translate that into the query language for other SIMs. So I like to describe it as kind of like a Rosetta Stone for SIM queries, right? So some of the authors of Sigma have described it like the second bullet there: for log files, what snort is to network traffic and YAR is to files. That's focusing perhaps a little more on potentially the detection capabilities that you could write with Sigma, but you can also use it as just kind of a translator to say, hey, we've got this idea, we've got a query, we've got something that we want to do with data, and now we can write that out in Sigma's generic kind of description format, and then use a converter to translate that into a number of other SIM queries or rules. And that's super helpful for the query writer, obviously, because someone like Corelight and SOC Prime, who helped develop the rules we're about to announce, we can write those once, and then customers of ours and people who are interested in these rules can take them and adapt them into whatever SIM they're using, whether that's Elastic or Splunk or Humio or something else, right? And so that's pretty exciting and a great benefit to using Sigma. Part of what's required with Sigma, of course, then is to have those particular mappings from both the data and the SIM output to be able to write in the Sigma language and have it be translatable. So what we did last year was Corelight contracted with SOC Prime, and a big shout out to Nate Guigenti, who created the Zeek data mappings for Sigma. So we published those last year, and those are really just a way to make sense of all of Zeek's fields in the logs that Ed mentioned, and translate those into a format that could be used with the Sigma language. You can go and take a look at the GitHub link. As Ed said, we'll share this deck with everyone, and that'll be available so you can go take a look, but you can also search for Zeek and Sigma and kind of see where those things got pulled into Sigma's master branch. And there's also a quick demo that Nate gave on this Twitter link. So that was the first step in this process: get Zeek mapped into the Sigma language, which is great. And one of the things we're also really excited about is Sigma has been pretty heavily endpoint based up to, the pretty near future, the pretty recent future, recent past, I should say. But Zeek is really helping to change this, right? And so by just getting more eyes and interest on Sigma, especially around the network detection space, we're hoping that we can generate interest in the community and make sure that people see that Sigma is a powerful tool to be used not just for EDR data, but also for NDR data. So it's pretty exciting. Here's an example of what it looks like. So this is just to show you kind of what Sigma is and have it make a little more sense maybe looking at one. So here's a Sigma query, here's a Sigma rule on the left, right? You see how it's set up. There's a title and description, an author, a date, some references, some tags, and then the actual detection or rule itself is written down there in the bottom. On the right hand, you see basically the schema for what a query looks like in Sigma. And so this is just the schema on the right, and then an example of what it looks like on the left. And then if I go to the next slide, you'll see here's an example output of that query in 2 different SIMs. So you see that, yeah, they're pretty similar, right? But the way that they're getting the files is different. The source type is different here, the event data set for Elastic or the source type for Splunk, and then some of the actual query itself or the detection itself has been changed or translated for that specific SIM. So while these aren't huge changes in some respects, they really are something that you'd have to go through. And for the amount of rules that we're talking about when you're sharing dozens or hundreds of rules, right, having to do this translation for each one can really be a pain. So having to write out a single rule and then translate it to 4, 5, or 10 different SIMs, as the case may be, it's sure great to have something like Sigma to help make that translation happen. So one of, while Sigma is, again, an open source project and written by Florian Roth and some others, right? It's been around for a number of years. I think the kind of primary proponent and place that people are often finding Sigma rules is through SOC Prime and their threat detection marketplace. They have a way to log in and check out not only Sigma rules, but also other rules that are written for specific SIMs. And they've got collections of detections as well. So we've been working with them for quite a while, and access into the threat detection marketplace is free. You can go in and check out the free rules there, and then they also have a way to kind of purchase upgraded access to get access to other things. They've also got a really cool bounty program where you can log in if you're interested in writing rules and actually get paid to do that. So TDM, the Threat Detection Marketplace, is where a lot of the Sigma content is hosted and where the Sigma rules that we're about to announce are as well. There's one other tool to mention, which is Uncoder, which is kind of like an online web translator app created by SOC Prime as well, that you don't need to log into. You can just paste in a Sigma rule and then translate it to some other SIM queries. So that's good to know about too. And there's a whole bunch of different SIM and data formats. A few are listed below, but all the most common ones that people are using are part of TDM, and it's a never increasing list. So it's cool to see. So the big announcement we have is that after the mapping of the Zeek data that I talked about, we now are, I'm trying to get to the next slide. There we go. We are now announcing 70 new Sigma rules that are released by us, by Corelight. And SOC Prime helped us write these, so we contracted with them to write the rules themselves, but these were created by Corelight, and they are free and open to the community. So the cool thing is that these are mapped into MITRE ATT&CK TTPs, and they are designed around our threat hunting guide that Ed mentioned. So now you basically have the Zeek data that's available in Sigma. You've got our threat hunting guide that walks through a whole bunch of real world examples of how you might take on specific MITRE ATT&CK TTPs and go and look for that data. And these are mostly kind of a generalized walkthrough, like what you might look for if you were looking for a particular kind of C2. And then we have these Sigma rules that we just released that actually go into specific details of then how you would go and do that search in your SIM. So you've got the conceptual kind of walkthrough of how an attacker might be using a particular technique, and then you have a corresponding rule in Sigma that you can translate into your own SIM to actually go and do those specific hunts and start that work. Of course, many of these rules are designed to be a starting point, right? A lot of threat hunting involves a starting point, a hypothesis, something to test, and then looking into the data with knowledge of your network and understanding of iteration and being able to search deeper and deeper into the data. But we really feel like these are a great way to start. They cover a whole bunch of categories across MITRE ATT&CK, 16 unique top-level techniques. And like I mentioned, they're free and open to contributions and improvements. We're really hoping that people will take these, check them out, and write back and say, hey, we've got another idea for how to do this, or there's a little error in the query here. I think you guys should try it this way. We'd love to hear that. Right now, they're hosted on, as I mentioned, SOC Prime's TDM, and so you can go on to tdmsocprime.com, get a free account. Log in there and then quickly access our rules just by doing a search for the Corelight THG or Threat Hunting Guide. I did want to mention that that's not the only place these rules will be available, right? These are going to be free and open in other formats as well. So we expect to have a way to be able to provide these as just kind of a bundle, either in Sigma format or potentially in some of the other SIM query formats in the future. But for now, we'd love to have you go check out the Threat Detection Marketplace and take a look at the rules on there. And I'm going to pass it over to Mark at this point to kind of walk through a couple of the specific rules and talk about how we might use them.
Thank you, Vince. Okay, so once you go to the Threat Detection Marketplace and search for Corelight and find the rules, this is what you'll see, right? A list of rules. Here's just 4 of them. As Vince mentioned, we've got like over 70 in there right now that we're releasing. And when you find one that you want to start with that you're particularly interested in, just click on it. And what will happen is it will take you to a screen that looks like this. So in this case, we're reviewing the possible web shell put or post to unusual extensions rule, right? So this rule looks for a put or a post to an extension that you wouldn't typically expect somebody to put or post data to over HTTP, like a JPEG or a GIF or PowerPoint or something like that. Now, what you need to do after that is translate it to your particular SIM. So we're working with Corelight data. I've selected Corelight in the left-hand side. Now, in Threat Detection Marketplace, it asks you like which platforms you use. I've told it that I use Corelight, so Corelight is at the top of the list for me. If it's not for you, what you need to do is click on that Show More button down in the bottom left and go find Corelight from among those options. Once you've selected it, the top bar there where it says Elastic Query, Elastic Alert Rule, Elastic Save Search, etc., that's where you would then choose the specific SIM that you're working with. There's also a more option off to the right where there might be some more listed. In this case, the ones that are hidden are like Azure Sentinel and QRadar are also in that list. I've selected Splunk Query. And so now down here in the main part is the translated Splunk query. So all that's left to do is to click on the Copy to Clipboard button. It's the 2 overlapping rectangles that's circled here. And that will drop it on your clipboard. So then the next thing is, of course, just to go drop it into your SIM and see what shakes out. So I've pasted that here into Splunk and run it against a data set. Set my time window for 200 days just to go back and do a retro hunt of a bunch of stuff. And I can see a few hits. So now the next step, of course, is to then look at those and see are they interesting? So we see some hits to puts or posts to pixel.gif on this domain at spillpaletonline.com. My spidey sense is tingling, but that's just because every time I've encountered a domain that is 3 random words that don't seem to have any real connection to each other, it's generally bad. But that's just my history. Your history might be different. And the context of your organization and your network might be different as well, right? That's why it's hunting. We start with this, and then we have to continue on the investigation. So that is just one rule. We'll take a look at a couple more examples to show what you might be able to do with this. Another one of the rules here is response from external facing service, an overview query. What this is designed to do is to point out systems inside your network which are accepting connections from outside your network. And so this is definitely a hunt, right? This is definitely not something that you would drop in as a detection or an alert, because most networks have stuff from the outside that connect to the inside. Most networks have services they offer to the outside world, even if it's just like a web server or an email server that can receive SMTP from the outside world. So what you have to do is take this, put it in, and then go look through the results and see, what do you expect to be there? What do you not expect to be there? So go take this and then compare it to your configuration management database or asset database and see, like, which things do I know are supposed to be offering services to the world? So in this case, we see some hits here for this 192.168.0.2, which is accepting connections from the outside world on a port 22, which is most likely SSH. We can confirm that with the connection log. And so then it would be on me to go look and see, like, what is that system, and do I know that it's supposed to be accepting SSH connections from the outside world? And if it is, then I can just filter that out. I can take this query and modify it and filter out that record and filter out any others that I don't care about. And if I get down to a handful that I didn't know were there, then I can go chase down the application owners or the asset owners and ask them, why is this like this? You know, we can start to discuss the risks and figure out whether or not there is additional mitigation we want to put in place, or if this was inappropriate, or if it was set up and then forgotten about and was supposed to be torn down months ago and nobody circled back for it, things like that. So once you start with a hunt like this and filter out the stuff you don't care about, then you can turn it into an alert where anytime there's anything new, you get a notification and something you can follow up on. One more example here. This is another rule from our set. C2 DGA detected via repetitive failures. So we're looking for command and control domain generation algorithms, right? Evidence of a domain generation algorithm in use. We're doing that by targeting the DNS log and looking for repetitive patterns of NX domain or serve fail, right? So either the DNS server saying the domain doesn't exist, or having some sort of an error. And here we can see a whole bunch of gibberish domains being tried to look up by this 192.168.204.141. So this is definitely something we want to look into. It could be nothing. It could just as easily be a machine that's infected with some sort of a Trojan that's using a DGA to try and contact the outside world. So just a handful of rules there that you can take a look at to show the power of the rules and to show how to translate them. So with that, I will hand it back to Vince.
Great, thanks, Mark. Yeah, and really we just wanted to, basically make an announcement about these rules, intro them, and get you to go take a look, right? Here's a quick look on a mapping for MITRE ATT&CK of where these rules cover. And we expect to, again, keep adding to these and hope that we'll have some community involvement, participation with tuning and improving these rules over time. So with that, we do plan to have a couple further webinars where we might dive in deep on a couple of the specific techniques and maybe go through all of the different rules and the threat hunting guide walkthroughs for each of those. So keep your eye on your email for upcoming webinars where we dive deep. And let's see, I think maybe we have time for a question or two.
Yeah, let's open up the Q&A session. If anybody has any questions, please enter them into the questions window. We'd be happy to answer those for you. And first question, does this work with open source Zeek?
Yeah, so these rules are certainly designed to work with open source Zeek as well. While they have been, written for Corelight data, and so as Mark was showing, when Corelight is the data selected in TDM, there's actually, small differences just in really what the source type files are named because of the way Corelight names the files versus open source. But just a few tweaks to some of those rules, and you could set that up really easily, I think. To translate these and use them on open source data. There are one more proviso is there are a couple rules that are written around Corelight proprietary fields. So some of the detection collections that we have for our customers only are also included in there, but that's a pretty small subset of the rules. So yeah, I think the majority of these were designed to work with open source Zeek as well as Corelight.
Excellent, thank you, Vince. Next question is, you said this was free, but I see I need to log into TDM. Does this require a paid subscription to SOC Prime TDM? Yeah, so this does not require a subscription to TDM. As I mentioned, it's free to sign up. You can go ahead and sign up with any email address. I think they used to have a limitation that you couldn't use, Gmail and other providers. I think that's now removed. So you can sign up with, a personal address or, anonymous address, whatever you'd like, and download these. As I mentioned, if you're still uneasy with doing that and you don't want to work through TDM, but you're interested in these rules, we certainly will make them available in the future in just a downloadable bundle. And you can just take those and
run them through whatever Sigma converter tool locally you wanted to use. There's some command line ones, as well as that, Uncoder web app that I mentioned before.
Awesome. Thanks, Vince. And I think we got time for one last question. Do I have to install any software to use any of this?
Yeah, good question. Well, you certainly will need the Corelight or Zeek data, right? Since these queries are operating on that data, and you will need the SIM to run it on. Other than that, the Sigma rules themselves, you can get those from TDM or translate those using a command line tool that takes the Sigma rules and translates them into those SIM queries. So you can do that in a number of different ways, but there's no need to install that software locally. So if you've got Corelight or Zeek data and it's going into a SIM or even onto file storage, and you could even translate some of these rules into other types of queries directly. Yeah, you don't need to install anything. Just make sure you have the data and a way to query it, and these rules should make things faster.
Great. Now I'm going to squeeze in one last question. Does this work with Corelight at home?
Yeah, great question. It should definitely work with Corelight at home. There is a Humio export if you're using the free Humio that the Corelight at home is kind of introduced with. And so I think we've tested those. It's possible you might need to make a tweak to one of the file names. We'd love to actually get feedback from you if you try it. But I think if you go into TDM and you select instead of the Corelight output, because we don't yet have the Corelight Humio output mapped, it's something we're working on. We've already put in a request to get that done. If you select Humio on the left, you should get a Humio query that should work, I believe, with the Corelight at home output. So give it a try. Let us know if there's something wrong there. We'd love to help fix it.
Great. Thanks, Vince. All right. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up today's presentation. As I mentioned at the beginning, we did record this. Everyone that signed up will get a link to the recording. In that link to the recording on YouTube, you'll get a copy of this deck, which will get access to this resources slide. And with that, I'd like to thank our presenters. Thanks, Vince. Thanks, Mark, for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who registered and attended today. We appreciate you spending the time with us. Hope you found this valuable. And hope you have a great day. Thanks again.